Chapter 1. Viewed from a distance, say, from the vast desert outskirts known as the Badlands, Night City looks like a beacon, so massive and promising in its potential that many denizens of Cyberpunk 2077's brutal future see it as a place where they might escape their hard-scrabble lives and fulfill their dreams. And yet, as the game reminds us again and again, those who come to Night City seeking a better life often find only hardship, struggle, and loneliness. Like the city in which it is set, Cyberpunk 2077 may give off one impression when regarded from afar. One carefully constructed through years of marketing hype. But once players experience it up close, they'll find that the truth is something else. On one hand, it's a more earnest and sincere game than all its edgy marketing has suggested. On the other hand, through the words, Cyberpunk evokes a radical vision of the future. There's nothing revolutionary on offer here. Instead, it's a game obsessed with the past.
Come on! Who are you?
Chapter 2. Before you hit the streets of Night City, you'll construct your version of the game's central character, V, in a process indicative of one of Cyberpunk 2077's most glaring problems. For whatever reason, among all the hairstyles and eyes and makeup and tattoos you might expect, genitals are included as part of the character's creation process, with 2 penis options and 3 size settings for each, and only 1 vagina. Thankfully, your character's gender is not tied to your choice of genitals. You can create a dude with a vagina or a lady with a penis. That's no problem. But because of everything else about how the game handles trans identity, this hardly feels like the progressive step it should be. Rather than just letting you pick your pronouns independently of all your other characters' creations, your pronouns are assigned based on your selection of voice. Pick the feminine voice, and your pronouns are she and her, and vice versa. There are no non-binary pronoun options. As a trans woman with a voice that many would not describe as feminine, this direct linking of gender identity to having a voice that sounds masculine or feminine feels weirdly essentializing. I could have forgiven it if the rest of the game took strides to humanize trans identities, but boy, it sure doesn't. Ubiquitous throughout Night City are ads for a beverage called Chromanticure that features a female-coded model with a penis visible through her skin-tight clothing, making it clear that in Cyberpunk 2077, trans bodies are objectified and commodified. Some cis bodies are too, of course, but the crucial difference is that we constantly meet, interact with, and form relationships with cis characters who have far more dimension than the surface of any sexualized image on a billboard. The same can't be said of trans characters. Even if you opt to play as a trans V, she's not particularly well defined. The game is about what you see through her eyes and what she goes through, not about who she is as a person. In my 40 plus hours in Night City, I never met a single character of any significance whom the game made clear was trans. And one of the only queer-coded characters I encountered was an extremely unsavory cybernetic surgeon who does extremely unsavory things. I did spot a trans flag on one character's vehicle, though that hardly counts as positive trans representation and doesn't even necessarily mean the character is trans. It felt more like a way for Cyberpunk 2077's creators to say that they had included positive trans representation without actually putting thought into it or making trans people a visible part of the makeup of Night City. I get that Cyberpunk's dark future is intended not as a goal, but as something for humanity to avoid. As Mike Pondsmith, the creator of Cyberpunk tabletop game, has put it, the Cyberpunk future is a warning, not an aspiration. There's real potential for a grim world like the one Cyberpunk 2077 offers to serve as a lens through which our own world is critiqued. But the developers at CD Projekt Red failed to do anything with the trans options and identity they incorporated into the game to make them function in this way. And as V, you never have the option to say or do anything about it. The objectification of trans people is just background texture. Nothing more. For elements like the inescapable dehumanization of trans people on imagery throughout the city to function as any sort of critique of transphobia, the game itself would need to create tension around those images by showing us humanized trans people navigating that world. But it doesn't. The result is a game in which transphobic players, of which there will be many, can just laugh at us by using the character creator they consider worthy of mockery and derision, and by gagging at the romantic ads they see everywhere, or perhaps by fetishizing the model while continuing to see trans people as objects of desire, but not as full human beings. Meanwhile, we trans players are left wanting in its world for depictions that humanize us. Here in 2020, people boldly and bravely hack gender all of the time. And yes, I know that Cyberpunk 2077 takes place on a separate timeline in which the year 2020 looked very different than it does for us. But it's still a world in which people push their bodies to the extreme of technological modification, sometimes swapping out eyes or limbs like they're changing clothes. You'd think transgressing gender norms would be pretty commonplace too. And that, as a result, a fundamentally different understanding of gender and trans identity would have taken root in the world.